Today's daf we're going to learn is Nedarim daf chet. This week's learning is sponsored by Michael and Ariel Radwin in honor of Danny Sadanoff and Rebecca Perlin on the 30th anniversary of the invention of Hebcal. We use it. It's all due to Danny. Danny and Rebecca, your commitment to Torah learning in Israel continue to be an inspiration to the Radwin family. Danny also gets credit as the one who got me started with the podcast and was the man behind all the technical issues from day one. How to do a podcast, what service to use, what podcast server to use, and getting my website started. So he gets a lot of credit for our learning today. And he's still always there whenever I have a big issue. Okay, we're going to get started now with statements of Rav Gidal in the name of Rav. What we had yesterday, we kind of got off on tangents about nidoi, because we were talking about the language minudani lacha. From there, we got into the issue of nidoi, excommunication. From there, one of the statements we have was Rav Gidal. We had a bunch of laws. One of them, Rav Gidal said in the name of Rav, that a Talmid Chacham can put himself in excommunication and can also undo the excommunication. Now we're going to have three other statements of Rav Gidal in the name of Rav, not exactly connected. They're connected somewhat to our Masechet, but not exactly to what we were just discussing. But as usual, the Gemara has an associative connection. Once one thing's mentioned that somebody said, they mention a whole bunch of other things that person said, often in the same, that person said in the name of another person. We're going to mention a few things he said. So starting from the end of Zayin Amud Bet, Amar Rav Gidal Amar Rav, Minayin shenishbe'im lakayem et mitzvah. How do you know that you're allowed to take an oath to keep a mitzvah? Shenemal nishbati v'akayma lishmor mishpatzei tzidkecha. It's a verse from Tehillim. It says, I will swear and I will, in order to keep your mitzvot, the things you commanded me, your mishpatim, your laws. So to which the Gemara explains as why wouldn't you be able to take an oath? It seems, okay, we take oaths about all sorts of things. Why wouldn't I be able to take an oath about keeping a mitzvah? Well, the Gemara points out there's a big issue here. But everyone is already what we call mushba v'omei mehar Sinai. This, by the way, is one of the entries on your bookmarks. So mushba v'omei mehar Sinai means, by the way, if you don't have a bookmark, you can order them for free on our, just write to us an email, info@hadron.org.il. You can get the bookmarks on Nashim and the whole Seder. Anyway, Mushba v'omei mehar Sinai means that basically we all it was as if we were all at Matan Torah when the Torah was given. We all, in essence, swore at Har Sinai that we were going to keep the mitzvot. Now, if you swear, the Gemara is going to use this term later, it should have used it here as well, but there's a concept that ein shvuah chala al shvuah. If I already took an oath, and then I take the same exact oath, second oath is irrelevant. I've already taken an oath. Have this concept, ein bishul achar bishul. Once you've cooked something, that's where we can warm things up on Shabbat because we already cooked them. They're already cooked. There's no cooking process that's going to happen to it. Of course, there's all sorts of issues there as well. I'm not going to get into the details, but that's the concept. So now, if we're mushba v'omei mehar Sinai at Har Sinai, we all already swore to accept the Torah. So there should be no validity to an oath to keep a mitzvah. To which they say, Allah kamashma, what he was trying to teach us is, a person is allowed to motivate himself. So therefore, now this actually, there's a difference of opinion in the commentaries exactly how this works, but some commentaries say that what you're really doing is you're not actually taking an oath. There's really no oath, okay? It's that you're basically using this as a statement as a motivator. And what Rav Gidal is saying in the name of Rav is that one can do that even if, let's say, you take an oath, you use God's name, you're allowed to do that in order to motivate you to do the mitzvah. And you're not actually saying, I'm doing this because I want to keep the mitzvah. What you're saying is, I'm definitely, right? You say, I swear I'm going to take a lulav on Sukkot. Okay, now you already did a lulav, right? You already are commanded to do that. But the idea is you're basically motivating yourself to do it. And we allow you, because of the importance of motivating yourself to do a mitzvah, we allow you to do it. There's a whole debate about whether this is actually considered an oath, or is it a partial oath? Some people say it's not actually considered an oath at all because of mushba v'omei. Some people say it's a partial oath. Like, let's say if you go against it, you don't have to give a korban shvuah, which you normally have to do if you don't keep to your oath. This time you don't. There's a whole debate about whether this is actually considered an oath, partially an oath, not an oath at all, but it is permitted. That's the main thing he's trying to say. Amar Rav Gidal Amara, a second statement, okay, really a third, but for today it's a second statement. Ha'omer ashkim ve'eshne perek zeh, eshne mesechto zeh. If you say, I'm going to get up early and learn this chapter, or I'm going to get up early and learn this mesechet, neder gadol nadar le'Elohei Yisrael. This is a valid vow. To which the Gemara says, it's interesting, they're using the word neder and shvua interchangeably, but basically they're saying there should be no validity to a statement like this because exactly what we just said. You're already commanded to learn, so there's no validity to this. And if you want to say, if you want to say, just like we answered in the previous case, that this is just a motivating statement and therefore it's accepted, well, hainu de Rav Gidal kamaita. Rav Gidal already taught that in his previous statement, in which case we don't need him to repeat it in different words, to which they say this must be coming to teach something else. Ha kamashmalan, kevan di ibai pater nafshe b'kriyat shma shacharit v'arvit, mishum hachi chayil shvua alei. So now they say, well, since theoretically you can fulfill your basic mitzvah of reading Shema in the morning and the afternoon, in the nighttime, and that fulfills your obligation of Talmud Torah. Okay, there's a whole debate about whether that really fulfills it, doesn't fulfill. Obviously, one is supposed to learn more than just that, but let's just go with the way they understand it here. There's all sorts of commentators that say, but wait, you're commanded to do more things, but let's just keep it simple. This can fulfill your basic commandment, which means if you want to say Mushba Ba'omed Mehar Sinai, well, your Mushba Ba'omed, theoretically, to say Kriyat Shema in the morning and at night. And that way you get V'hagita Bo Yomam B'layla, that you're supposed to learn in the morning and at night. Do one in the morning, one at night. And therefore, now this is a different answer than the previous one, there is place for the Shvuah to apply, which means the Shvuah will apply because you're not commanded to learn necessarily this Masechet or this parak. First of all, some people say it's specifically because our mitzvah to learn is not to learn this specific parak. Our mitzvah to learn is to learn in general. This specific parak might be excluded from it. It's a little difficult to say that because you say the same thing with the mitzvah. But some people do comment like that. In this case, it sounds like the shvuah will actually apply as opposed to the last one where the shvuah doesn't really apply or maybe partially something. It's just viewed as something different that you're just trying to motivate yourself. In this case, it actually has room to apply. And I see someone asked about women. The same thing would be true for women. Since women aren't commanded to learn by the Torah law, therefore, if women take an oath that I'm going to learn something, then actually it would apply. Okay, it would be an actual shvuah. Whereas, again, for a man, it would apply as well, but for a different reason. Because if you say something specific, right, then that's your basic is Shema in the morning and at night. Excuse me 1 minute. Since your basic is Shema in the morning and night for a man, therefore, your shvuah can apply if you say, I want to learn something specific. Say, I want to learn in general, it won't apply. For a woman, it would apply if you say, I want to learn in general. I see all those jokes going around about Nedarim and Bli Neder and all that. So this would actually be relevant, right? If you take upon yourself, I'm going to learn Nedarim. Again, you say it in the language of an oath. You shouldn't ever really do that anyway, but if you were to, then you really would have to continue. Okay. Amar Rav Gidal Amar Rav. Ha'omer l'chavero. Another kind of statement you can say. Ashkim v'nishne perek zeh. Let's get up early together and learn this chapter, learn this parak. Whatever we're learning, learn this chapter together. Alav lahashkim. You have to get there first. Okay? In other words, make sure you're there when the other person shows up. Right? This is a good, if you want to motivate someone to do something and then you yourself don't show up, right? Or you show up late, it's not very good. You should be the first one there. Where do we get this from? A verse in Yechezkel. Okay, in Yechezkel chapter 3, verses 22 to 23, it says, Vayomer Ilai, Yechezkel says, God said to me, Kum se'el habik'ah, go out into the valley, v'sham edaber otach, and there I will speak with you. Yechezkel continues and describes what happened. Ve'etze'el habik'ah, I went down into the valley, v'hinei sham kvod Hashem omed, and when I got there, the presence of God was already there. So what do you see? God made sure to be there first. He was the one who did the inviting. He was there first. Therefore, if you say, let's go learn, you should make sure to be there first. So we have 3 statements of Rav Gidal. From here, we're going to move on. The first one was an oath to accept a mitzvah, you're allowed to do that, even though it's not really exactly considered an oath. We have, if you say, I'm going to get up early and learn, that actually does seem to be considered an oath, because you could say your obligation from Har Sinai was once in the morning, once at night. Again, a little bit of a question about that, because you really are commanded to learn more things. So deliberation about how exactly this works. And then you have to be there first. Amar Rav Yosef. Now we get back to Nidoi, which was the topic we were discussing, which we got to kind of from another way, but we were discussing that. And then we're going to get back to one of the laws about Nidoi that we talked about, and the importance of not using God's name in vain. That's going to be at the end of our daf. But now we're going to get back to Nidoi, but a little bit of a strange case of Nidoi. Amar Rav Yosef, Niduhu b'chalom. If you had a dream that someone put you in excommunication in your dream. Now there's a concern among the rabbis that what's a dream? And we just talked about prophecy. The dream is like a prophecy, and maybe it's a prophecy from God, and maybe God is telling you something, and maybe you're deserving Nidoi by the hands of God. So now this gets very tricky. Who generally gets you out of Nidoi? The person who put you in Nidoi. At this point, if you have a dream that somebody put you in Nidoi, then basically it's as if God put you in Nidoi, and now you're kind of stuck. So how do you get rid of it? To which the Gemara says, Rav Yosef says, Tzarich 10 bnei adam lahatir lo. You need 10 people to undo this neder, right? 10 is usually, right, there's a significance in numbers. 3 is often, right, a beitin. This you need more like a minyan number, a number that shows tzibur, community, people, public. That's the way to get rid of it. But they now say, well, it's not just any 10 people. Behu detanu hilchata. People who learn halacha, which is more considered like Gemara. Avam matnu v'lo tanu lo. There's different ways to understand this. Some people say the simple reading is, we mean if you learn Mishnah, but not halacha, then it doesn't work. In other words, you need to learn Gemara more so than Mishnah. Some people say it has to do with learning and teaching. If you teach but don't learn, if you learn but don't teach, that won't work. You need people who teach Torah. There's a different opinion about what exactly it is, but you need some sort of caliber of Talmud scholars. Okay, but if you have no choice, then you can go to the second level. So if it's either Gemara versus Mishnah, so then, okay, if you have no choice, people learn Mishnah is sufficient, or if it's teachers versus students theoretically could work if you have no choice. What if you can't even find that? Then what do? You go to a big intersection, a place where people are passing by. You say hello to 10 people. Those 10 people say hello back to you. Until you find 10 that have learned halacha. In other words, it's actually a debate about what exactly you need. Do you need 10 people all at the same time who learned halacha? Or do you, and that's the idea is branch out more in your community. You can't go to a place where there's a lot of people passing by. Say hello to many, many people. Eventually you'll have 10 who said hello back to you, and that will do it. Okay, why does that do it? People saying shalom to you. Different explanations are provided. Some people say it basically the word shalom 10 times from 10 different people ultimately dissolves the nidoi. It's kind of like going in front of 10 people and having them dissolve it by 10 people saying shalom to you, that dissolves it. Some people say that not that it really dissolves the nidoi, it's just that nidoi, if you're deserving of excommunication, it means that you're going to end up with suffering. And the shalom blessing, the people are blessing you with, is going to basically protect you from those bad things that might come upon you. It will provide you with some protection. Interesting the way the word shalom has so much power, according to this, to really fix some sort of big problem here. Okay, again, unclear exactly how it works, but there are different explanations. Amarle Ravina le Rav Ashi, we'll see later on in today's daf. Also, Ravina asked Rav Ashi something. Yada man shamte ma'u delishchele. If you sign your dream that someone you know put you in nidoi, and you remember, right? You don't often remember things, but you remember vividly. It was a particular person and you knew that person was. So maybe it would be easier to just go to them. Can you go to them and have them undo it? If they're the one who put you in nidoi, if it wasn't in a dream and if it was in real life, and so someone put you in nidoi, they're the ones who can undo the excommunication. So if you saw someone in your dream put you in nidoi, and it wasn't just some random, you don't know who or what, and you don't remember, but you remember vividly it was this person, can you go to that person and have him undo the nidoi? Amar le, Rav Ashi answers him, L'shimute shavya shaliach, l'mishrei lo shavya shaliach. We're assuming that if you saw it in a dream, it's possible that God put you in nidoy, and it's basically a God-commanded thing. Now, if it was done by a particular person in your dream, that just means that God sent them as his messenger. That's different than when you're in real life and somebody decides you're going into nidoy, they did it on their own. If they're acting as a messenger of God, it's really God who put you in nidoy, and God needs to undo it. So what he's saying here is God made him a shaliach to put you in nidoy, but we don't know if God made him a shaliach to undo the nidoy, and therefore you can't just find that person and have him undo it. You need to go through this procedure that we discussed before about the 10 people. Another question. Here's a good question. In my dream, I was excommunicated, but they undid it in the dream. So can you assume God put you in excommunication, but he already undid it, and therefore you're okay? So he says, what's the halacha? Amar le, Rav Ashi answers him, Kashem she'i efshar lebar below teven, just like you can't have grain without straw, kach i efshar lechalom b'li dvarim b'telim. There's no such thing as a dream without, right, I should say it better, the wheat without the chaff. There's no such, okay, we're now in Amabet, there's no such thing as a dream without unnecessary things in it. This bar below teven actually comes from a verse in Yirmiyahu, chapter 23, verse 28, which basically is talking about the false prophets. And it compares the false prophecy, it calls the false prophets, here I'll read the pasuk, it says, Hanavi asher ito chalom yisaper chalom. This false prophet who has a dream will tell his dream, Va'asher dvari ito, but the one who has God's word with him, Yidaber divrei emet, will speak words of truth. Ma leteven et habar ne'um Hashem. How can straw be compared to grain? In other words, they call the Nevi'eh Sheker the straw and the chaff, and they call the real prophets the bar, the grains, okay, the wheat. So now they use this as an imagery because it's talking about false things and how sometimes we end up, the teven is the false. So sometimes we end up with false things in our dreams. So now while we have to be stringent and assume that the nidoy was real, we can't assume that the undoing of it was real. Could be just right. We all know that our thoughts and what we want sometimes happens in our dreams, not always. But therefore, it could be that, that was just kind of your wishes in the dream is that it went and got dissolved, but not that God wanted to. And therefore, you can't assume that that's going to resolve it, and you have to go and resolve it yourself. Ravina havale nidra ledebitu. Now we have a case. Oh, 1 second. There was something I wanted to read before we go on. The Ran says something very interesting here. The Ran says, first he says, at the end of the first line on Amubet, V'tzarech iyun, sadi ayin means tzarech iyun, and we need to look into it further. We're going to treat this person stringently to the extent that you have to go find 10 people to dissolve your nidoy, your excommunication. But does it mean that all the laws of nidoy apply? That's a good question. He's not sure. Okay. How seriously do we take the stream? Yes, we're going to be more strict and say, go figure out a way to undo it, and also maybe think about what you're doing wrong in your life and use it as what we call cheshbon hanefesh, to kind of look inside and figure out what's going wrong. But does it mean that we have to treat you as you're excommunicated? That's a good question. He's not sure. The second thing he says, he now says, mistaberli, second line of the Ran here, even though we say here that someone who is in nidoy in his dream needs a heter, since we're talking about Nedarim, vows, let's take this to vows. Don't learn from here that if you took on a vow in a dream, that you need to do hatarat nedarim and get the vow dissolved. In other words, nidoy and neder we're going to distinguish. Okay, a neder, if I took on a vow in a dream, that's very different. You can figure out why it's obviously different. The reason here is mishum di'ikalameimar shemin hashamayim nidu. We're worried that maybe it was a God-imposed nidoy. But God doesn't put a vow upon you A vow is only something you put upon yourself. So if you dream that you made a vow, that's an irrelevant dream. If you wake up and you don't want that kind of vow, it's irrelevant. But because the nidur could have been imposed by God, there's a concern about that. We're going to treat it seriously. But the Ran ends with, I saw a tshuva of the Rashba. There was a case where someone dreamed that they vowed about something, and he made them do hatarat nedarim, and made him dissolve the vow, which is very interesting. He doesn't explain why, on what basis the Rashba said it. It's very interesting because the distinction the Ram makes seems quite obvious. But interestingly, the Rashba doesn't agree with it. I want to just point out at this point that Shuli Mishkin posted yesterday in Flashback, her first post from Masechet Nedarim, and it's all about the Ran and historically who the Ran was and different works he had. And since the Ran is so central and we're going to learn him a lot, it's definitely recommended reading to learn up a bit about the Ran. Okay, now, right, who's otherwise known as Rabbeinu Nisim. Now we're going to continue with our questions. Ravina, here we have a real life case. Ravina havalein nidra ledebitu. Okay, we're now on neder. Okay, we're kind of flipping back and forth. Maybe this is here because Ravina had asked Rav Ashi about that other thing, and now he's asking him another question. Nadra ledebitu. If there's a neder on your wife took a vow. So hadrele nidra ledebitu. His wife took on a vow. Ravina himself. His wife had a vow. Now you're going to have to assume in this case that it wasn't, for whatever reason, it wasn't the kind of vow that he could have just said, you can't make this vow. Okay, there's something called hafarat nedarim, which is a husband can be mefail the nedarim of his wife. That means basically the wife vows, he can basically say, no, that it's not relevant. He dissolves it immediately. It's not hatara, it's something different. It's hafara. He basically works by a different mechanism. Hatarat nedarim, I'll already explain this, and this is going to come up in a minute. Hatarat nedarim works by the fact I took a neder, I go to a Beit Din, and I say, listen, I really feel bad, I regret. It's called chachata. I regret that I made this vow. Had I known, blah, 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 I never would have made the vow. And based on that, it's called, we give a petach to the neder, like a way to find a way out. Usually it's pretty easy. They help you even sometimes find the petach to get out of the vow. But you need to kind of get out of it with some sort of excuse. In a hafarat nedarim, the husband can do it for any reason. Okay. However, he's limited. What's he limited? Well, first of all, once he lets it go, first of all, there's maybe a time limitation on it. Maybe he has to do it that day. And if he didn't, then it's already what we call, he was mekayem the neder. He accepted it, which means once you accept it, you can't do hafara anymore. There's only certain vows that you can do this with. There's a debate about it. We saw this in the last Masechet. Could be only things that are beino lebeina. They have to do with the two of them. It has to be things that affect him in some way. So this, for whatever reason, could have been, didn't affect him in any way. It could have been, he already did kiyum ha-neder, and now he wants to get rid of it. Whatever reason, it doesn't fall into the category of hafara. So he now, what does he want to do? Rabbi Ashi goes before Rav Ashi and he asks the following question. Amrle, Ba'al ma'u she'aseh shaliach lecharatat ishto. Can I come to the court and give my wife's regret for her? Okay. Now this seems to imply, and I say seems to because we're going to give two different interpretations, which are in my mind very fascinating. This seems to imply that anyone else can't do charata for someone else. Oh, again, we're going to go two ways with this. He clearly thinks that he's asking, is a husband different from everyone else? So it sounds like one way of reading it is, and the Ran starts with this. Maybe I'll even read it inside. This is the last wide line of the Ran there. Harambam zal sovel beperek vav nechot shvuot. The whole question is about a husband only, because it's obvious he's going to say that someone else can't do charata for you, can't go to the court and say, I really didn't need to make this neder, right? So if, let's say you took a vow and you asked me, listen, I can't really go to court today. Can you go for me? And can you get my neder annulled? Okay, can you go and can you say to them, listen, I didn't realize all the ramifications, blah, blah, blah. Can you do that for me? This is right. Good question. So first of all, right, can you go to the bathroom for someone, right? So it's the age-old question. Of course, you can't do that, right? Sometimes you're lazy. Like, can't you just do that for me? So you can't do that. There's all sorts of other questions asked. Can you do a mitzvah for someone? It's actually very interesting, right? Shaliach for a mitzvah. Can you, like, there's certain things that you can have other people do for you. And there's certain things that have to be done by you yourself. You can't just have someone else do it for you. So according to the Rambam, charata is one of these things, because regret is, right? It's like you can't have someone do tshuva for you. And this is maybe almost like that. You're saying, I regret that I did this. I didn't mean to. You have to come to the court yourself to do it. The only question is, maybe a husband could do it for his wife. Why? Because of this concept of ishto kegufo, which is a husband is considered just like the wife. The wife is considered just like the husband. This has all sorts of ramifications. That's why, let's say in your house, if everybody lights Hanukkah candles, sometimes the husband and the wife just light one. Okay, the wife is allowed to light her own, but they want either the wife can light for the husband can light for the wife, because ishto kegufo. There's all sorts of other halachot that come up like that. It was mentioned, Aviva Adler, who you all, I hope, heard finish Shas at the last Siyum. So she also had another event where her husband spoke, and he basically said ishto kegufo. So I just finished Shas also because she finished, right? So that would be a good example of where he can't exactly say that. So there you see the border between sometimes you can say it and sometimes you can't. So now so that's his question according to the Rambam. The opposite approach is also quoted in the Ran, is taken by Tosfot. So he quotes Tosfot. I'll just read it from the Ran, even though we can read it from Tosfot. If you look, the Ran lines get narrow and then they get wide again. So 2 lines before they get wide, he says, but Tosfot pershu behefer. He said the exact opposite. V'amru adraba, gabe inish da'alma pshitalan diachol asot shaliach. What do you mean? If you have regret, you have regret, but you don't have to show it in front of the rabbis. You can just ask someone to pass on your words and get it dissolved without a problem at all. Specifically, the husband is the opposite. It's coming from the opposite perspective. Maybe it's more of an issue to have the husband do it for the wife. Okay, forget about ishto kegufo. This is, and what's the opposite of that? Well, the husband is what we call nogea b'davar. He has ulterior motive, right? He's related to her, and he has a particular motivation that might cause him to lie a little bit or exaggerate. So Baal dafka hudi ba'elam, why? Specifically, there's the question. Mishum dechayshina. Because he doesn't want his wife to have Nedarim on her. We saw that all from Masechet Ketubot. It's not good to have a wife with vows upon her. Yosif mida'ato b'chatarata. When he comes to the court and he says, listen, my wife regrets it for this and this reason, he might add all sorts of things that she never actually said or doesn't believe. He said, oh, my wife regrets it because of this, that, and the other thing, and it's just not true. So if you're a random shaliach and I asked you to do it for me, you don't care. You're just doing a nice thing for me. You're helping me out. So you're not going to lie for me, but the husband might have motivation to lie. So let's see what his answer is. So this is very fascinating because it really has ramifications. If you want to talk about how does the laws of shlichut work, being a messenger for someone, what things can you be a messenger, what things you can't be a messenger, here you come to 2 opposite conclusions, whether you go with the Rambam or the Tosfot, about what really the case is here, what his question is, has more ramifications on what the basic halacha is about whether a shaliach can do your charata for you or not. So now, Amarle, the answer he gets is the following. If they're already gathered in a court, then yes. Ilo, lo. But if they're not gathered already, then not. Now you have to go back to the 2 explanations we had, and how does this answer the question based on what we thought? So according to the first explanation, you can read this all in the Ran. He explains it more in detail. I'll just kind of summarize. If you hold that normally this doesn't work, only ishto kegufo, we're going to let it work, well, then we're going to limit it, basically. We're going to say not in every situation, though we're only going to allow it in a narrow situation where the courts are already gathered, yes, but to allow you to go gather your own, make your own beit in, that we're not going to let, okay? Again, it's not exactly perfect in terms of the answer doesn't exactly relate 100% to the question. It's just basically saying, since this isn't allowed in general, we're going to limit where we do allow it. So we will allow it, husband or wife, but we're going to limit how we allow it. Second, according to Tosfot, neither of these work perfectly. That's why, again, there's always 2 explanations. So according to the Tosfot, who basically says anyone can do this and just we're worried more about the husband. So what he explains is we're worried about the husband more so that he's going to lie when there's 2 things that are difficult for him. Number 1, it's difficult for him that the wife has vows. Number 2, that he had to go all this way to gather a court together. He's going to say, right, that's what we call a tircha, a burden to get your own court together. Once he's done that, he doesn't want to mess it up, right? He doesn't want to lose his chance. It was already such a big deal to find a beit din that now we're worried more so he's going to lie. If it's only one thing, because the court was already in session, he just showed up there, and it's just that he doesn't want his wife to have to ask, we're less worried he's going to exaggerate and lie. So again, take it or leave it, right? Neither of these work perfectly with the answer, but in any case, right, they at least give some explanation. Now the Gemara says, from this question Ravina asked Rav Ashi, and from the answer Rav Ashi gave, Shema mina tzla. We had yesterday, we can infer from here 3 laws. Shema mina ba'al naseh shaleach l'charatat ishto. We learned that a husband can be a messenger to do the charatah for his wife in order to annul her vow. Ushma mina lo shari lemishrei nidra ba'atre de rabbi. This is an interesting Shema mina. It's a little difficult how to follow this, how they get it from the story, but they assume because Ravina went to Rav Ashi and didn't do it himself, we learned here that you can't permit a neder, you can't do atarat nedarim in a place where your rabbi is there. If he's there, you have to go, if you're in the city where your rabbi is, you have to go to your rabbi to do it. Now, bit of a strange question. Ravina couldn't have done it. It was his wife. So first of all, some people say, well, he could have maybe done it with 2 other rabbis, which again, he could have created his own beit din. Again, it's a little bit difficult. It's difficult for 2 reasons. Number one, it sounded like he wasn't even sure about the answer, and that's why he went to his rabbi. So that, no matter how you explain it, is a bit of a question. Number 2, it's still strange that he would be one of the 3 of the beit din when he went on behalf of his wife. That would be strange. Some people say he could have just gathered 3 random rabbis, and instead he went to Rabbi Ashi, which shows that you have to go to your own rabbi. Okay. Again, it's still a little difficult because he seems like he went to Rav Ashi because he really had a question and not necessarily to do, he wouldn't have gathered 3 rabbis because he wasn't sure if he could do it. Third thing we learned, Shema mina, ki mechanfin shapir dami. And it only works though if they're already gathered, okay, if the beit din exists. Now they point out, Vishamta afilu ba'atre de rabbi. If it was nidoy, we're comparing, okay, the Ran just before was talking about nidoy and compared it to neder and said, well, just because nidu b'chalom, you have to worry about it. If you vowed in your dream, you wouldn't have to worry about it. Here we're talking about neder, and then the Gemara compares it back to excommunication. If we're talking about, this was all to annul your vow. What if you want to dissolve an excommunication? Well, for that, afilu ba'atre de rabbi, we're going to make it much easier for you. Now, you might have thought nidoy is much harsher. We're going to be more strict, but it's the opposite. Because nidoy, now there's 2 reasons why. Because nidoy is very severe, and therefore we're going to try to undo it as best we want to get you out of it quickly. It's unpleasant to be excommunicated. So therefore, you don't have to go find a rabbi to do it. You can do it yourself if you're a dayan or you're a person. You can do it even if your rabbi's in the city. You don't have to go waiting until you find him and he has the time. Or some people say it's because the nidoy affects other people. People who talk to you basically go against the nidoy, and that's a problem. We talked about this yesterday. And therefore, there's motivation to try to get rid of the nidoy, or here that it's the shamta, which again is just another type of excommunication. So we allow you to do it. Number 1, even in the city of your rabbi. If your rabbi's there, you could still do it. And even though normally you need a court, an individual who is an expert, there's all sorts of things we're going to learn when we get to Sanhedrin that you normally need 3 judges for, but if there's 1 expert, he can do it. If he's very knowledgeable in this area, he's allowed to undo the shamta. Amar Rabbi Shimon bar Zvi. Now we're going to have a very long passing on of this tradition. Okay, we're going to have a long list of people. You can count if you want while we go along. I didn't count, but there's a lot of them. Amar Rabbi Shimon bar Zvi. He said in the name, right? So Rav Shimon bar Zvi said, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Tavla. He said in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak bar Tavla. Amar Rabbi Chia Aricha, to be Rabbi Acha. Chia Aricha in the house of Rabbi Acha said this. Amar Rabbi Zera, was the name of the Rabbi Zera, in the name of Amar Rabbi Elazar. Amar Rabbi Chanina. Amar Rabbi Miyasha. Mishmei de Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai. They get all the way back to Rabbi Yehuda, who's the famous Rabbi Yehuda in all our Mishnayot. And you see this Rabbi Yehuda stam, it's Rabbi Yehuda bar Rabbi Ilai. They pass down in his name. My tichtiv. This, by the way, is going all the way back to yesterday's daf, where we talked about one of the things about nidoy is you get yourself in nidoy if you use God's name in vain. And if you didn't put the person in nidoy, you also are deserving of nidoy. So now we're going to go back to this, how serious we take taking God's name in vain. And here we're going to have the more positive reinforcement rather than negative reinforcement, although we'll get back to some negative reinforcement later. But the positive is the following. When the pasuk says, we're now quoting a pasuk in Malachi, chapter 3, verse 20. I'll read you the whole verse. The sun will shine on those who fear my name. Shemesh staka, a righteous sun, umar pebik nafeh, and it will heal with its wings. Okay, wings seem to be the rays of the sun, although we'll explain it a little more differently in a minute. You will go out and I think it's reproduced. Maybe someone can help me with the English. Let me just find it here for a second. You shall go forth and leap, as calves of the stall. Okay? So now, right, meaning it'll be a big celebration. So now the Gemara says, or in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, all these rabbis quote, "My dechtiv v'zarcha lachem yirei shmi." Who are these yirei shmi? They fear my name. It doesn't say they fear God. They fear my name. So what do we learn from here? Elu b'nei adam she'em yireim lahotzi shem shamayim levatala. These are people that are very careful not to use God's name in vain. It's the opposite of the people we saw before. Here comes the positive reinforcement. Shemesh taka umar peh. Right, the sun will come forth and will heal them. Amar Abai shmamina chirga di yom amase. Abai says you can infer from here that the dust that comes from the rays of sun, right? There's always these rays, and then from there, there's like this little, it looks like dust. It's the dust that's going to be the one that heals. The Ran describes as avak, the dust that you see in the sun that comes through your window. When the sun's rays come to you, they come with this little dust. That's what's going to do the actual healing, because I guess that's how we understand the knafah, the wings. Not so sure what the meaning of this is, but I guess how strong the sun is, that even the dust that comes from the rays, that comes from the sun, is going to have this special healing power. Upliga de Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. This approach that this verse is talking about healing, basically who's going to be healed in this verse, is those who kind of protect God's name and don't use it in vain. And that is talking about this world. Shimon Lakish says it's talking about the world to come. He says, Da'amal ein gehenom la'olam haba. We always think that there's, right, in Olam haba, there's not going to be Gehenom. Okay? We always think of like a place of Gehenom, of hell. It says there's no place there won't be any Gehenom in Olam haba. What will happen? Ela HaKadosh Baruch Hu motzi chama min artika. God is going to take the sun out of its place, which means the sun is going to be very strong. Sounds like what's happening now, right, with the ozone layers. Tzadikim mitrapim ba urishonim nidonim ba. This is a fascinating thing about the sun in general, that on the one hand, it can be very healing. The sun is great for you, right? It's important to be out in the sun. On the other hand, it's also very dangerous, and it can burn you. It can cause cancer. It can cause all sorts of things. So the tzadikim will be healed by it. The evil people will be judged by it. They'll be burnt by the sun, whereas the tzadikim, it will be a positive thing for them. So the positive and negative, right, where we say the sun is good for you, but, in moderation, maybe things like that. But here we're going to say it depends who you are and how the sun is going to affect you. Now, how did they get to it from this pasuk? Shenema, v'zarcha lachem yirei shmi shemesh, right? The shemesh staka will be merapeh for the tzadikim, for the good people, the yirei shmi. There they don't take Shem Hashem specifically like those who use God's name. They're just saying the righteous people. So it's talking about, number one, different group of people. Right? Again, maybe there's an overlap, and in the world to come and not in this world. Okay, they're going to bask in it. Right? That's the latter part of the pasuk, which will be really good for them. They'll joy in it. Where did they get that from? There was nothing negative in that verse. Well, you didn't read the verse before. The verse before said, the day will come, bo'er ketanor, burning like a furnace. Now, they connect the burning of the furnace to the sun, and the other pasuk and say the sun will be this burning furnace, which will basically burn up all the people that are evil. And there it talks about the Risha Kikash, right? They're going to make the evil people like straw, which is interesting because we had the straw before with the chaff. They're going to be like straw and burn very quickly. I just wanted to end with this thought that what's interesting is the sun has these two elements to it, right? The sun can be very powerful and good. Can also be very powerful and dangerous. And I was thinking in the context of what we're learning about your speech. It's exactly right. Motzi shem shamayim levatala. You can motzi shem shamayim for good. You can motzi shem shamayim for bad. Also, our speech, right? Speech in general, we all know can be used for good and can be used for bad. And it has these two sides to it, just like the sun does. So I think it's also making a statement about speech in general. And right, it's one of those things that we always think about. You have to be very careful what words you use, how you speak, your tone and all that, because speech can be on the one hand very powerful in a good way and also very powerful in a dangerous way. With that, we'll finish our daf for today, maybe apropos elections and all that. Politics, which we all know how people use their words in politics is not always in the most positive of methods. Anyway, wishing everybody a great day.